What's up, everybody? I hope that George enjoys his theme song. So you want to get right to the core. So you want to know what it's all for. So you want to come off knowing more. Well, you better get hip. The podcast by George. So you want to get straight to the show. So you want to know what you need to know. You want to know what we're all here for. Well, you better get hip. The podcast by George. Podcast by George. Podcast by George. He knows what he's fighting for. It's podcast by George. Podcast by George. Want to know what we're fighting for?
You can't get started any better than that. Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome on in to another podcast by George. That's our guest today, folks. That's the great Ron Placone. He's coming back on podcast by George. And by way of introduction, for those that may not know, maybe haven't seen him on the show before, Ron Placone, he's a comedian. He's been seen on the Discovery Channel, the Jimmy Dore Show, Crosstalk, Young Turks, RT International, TMZ, Free Speech TV, Redacted Tonight, and more. His debut album, Agnostic Holiday, is in rotation on Sirius XM. Ron hosts podcasts, live streams, and a lot of other stuff. He's a touring comedian, and he's back on the road again, has been. As I started the show, I titled it that he'd been in Canada and he's been in America. He's going to Iceland, believe it or not. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Currently in production, he has a mini pilot called Loner and a movie called Left at the Wall. We're going to talk about that also. And for folks that may have seen him, and that's where I caught him, he was a regular on the Jimmy Dore Show, wrote a lot of the jokes and stuff for Jimmy. But let's get him back. Let's bring him on and say hello, hi. How are you?
What's up, George?
Ron,
how are you, man?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. It's good to see you back on here. So, right off the top, I always like to mention to folks that theme song. I play it all the time. People love it. They really like it. And it's easy to get one. If they just go to your Patreon, sign up there for $1 a month or something like that. You can get your own theme song. Everybody gets one. And don't be reluctant to ask for it. It kind of comes with the turf, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to ask for it. Like, I can't like read people's minds and know what they want, and not everybody wants one, which is fine too. But yeah, totally. If you join my Patreon, and that's for a give what you can level. So it can be as low as $1 a month or whatever your currency is, £1 a month, a Canadian dollar a month, whatever country you live in, one single currency of that is all it takes. And I will make you a theme song. You just message me, you say what you want it to be about. Sometimes it's for people's shows, like in your case. Sometimes it's for couples. I've done some romantic theme songs for folks. Some, the relationship didn't work out, which is kind of a bummer. But I don't blame the theme song. I've just done stuff for like people in their job. Like they want like something for their job. Sometimes people like they just like to party. They want something about that. What else? I've done a few things for organizations. Yeah, it's a good time. So yeah, you can join my Patreon, patreon.com/Rob Placone for Give What You Can level. And that is one of the perks. You get a theme song if you want one.
You got to get a lot of cat lovers, a lot of people with pets that watch your show. I think you've done them for pets.
I've done some pet ones.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely some pet ones.
Yeah.
Some are more heartfelt. I mean, I've had a few kind of like sincere requests, like for a little bit more of a sincere type song. So, and then others are funny. And so, yeah, it's fun. It's a really fun exercise for me. And, people seem to enjoy it, which is really neat. So,
well, talking about pets, let's get the most important thing out of the way here. The thing I always want to know, number one, a lot of people that follow you do also. How's Lucy?
Lucy's doing great. She just turned 16. So fortunately for me, she has no interest in driving a car because those are not getting any cheaper these days. So, but I don't need to worry about her driving, fortunately. But yeah, she's good. I mean, she's kind of rummaging around. Where is she right now? Yeah, she's just kind of running. She just had her breakfast and whatnot. So, she likes the fact that I work from home pretty much all the time these days, unless I'm on the road. She really likes that. She likes to have her humans. So, she's good.
Good on Lucy. And talking about the road now, we mentioned that to start with. Like everybody, you were shut down. You were locked down out there in California during the early stages of COVID. You had to cancel a tour. Now you got back out there, and I'm curious. I went from Canada into the upper part of the United States. You moved through the Midwest, I think, back to your home turf there in Pittsburgh. How have things changed on the comedy circuit? How have the audiences changed? What about what they're interested in the politics, or is it still the basic same, or has it changed like it seems like we all have?
Well, I don't know as far as people's interest if it's really changed at all, but I will say like I feel like we're in a place where we're not fully awake yet as far as like doing the things we all used to do. Like I feel like as a society, we had the lockdown, which I canceled 2 full-length tours. I mean, I canceled 2 years worth of tour dates, which was a really big bummer, I mean, it hurt. It was a really it was a really big bummer. But now being back out there some this year, and I'm still not doing a ton, but I'm doing some. Um, it seems like people are starting to come back out again, but there's still a little bit of like we're not quite back to normal, quote unquote. The analogy I like to make, it's sort of like the alarm went off and society is sort of stirring, but we haven't
Uh-huh.
had our coffee yet. Like we're not totally up and at, like we're sort of like we're maybe hitting the snooze button, and maybe we had our first coherent sentence. Maybe we even fed the cat and gave the cat a pet and like, oh, I love you, you're the best. Here's some food, but we haven't had our morning coffee yet, and so we're not quite there, and that's okay. I mean, that's bound to happen when you have what we've been going through and are still going through with the pandemic, but yeah, so you're seeing that in the shows and stuff like that. But, you know, it is one of those things. I would like to think I never took performing live for granted. I hope I didn't. But I can definitely promise you and anyone who comes to the shows, I really, really don't take it for granted now. And every single show I do, I treat it like it's my last. And I know that sounds kind of cheesy, and maybe it is, but it is really the
Uh,
gospel truth on how I feel, because it's just, tomorrow is not guaranteed. This thing of ours is not guaranteed. So I just, and performing live is one of my favorite things to do in the world. The only thing I love more is being with my wife and my household,
yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah, I really do just give it my all out there, and I have a great time, whether there's a full house or a handful of people. It
well,
doesn't matter.
you've always had a heavy mix of politics in your comedy. You do these protest songs that have been kind of turned around, updated for the modern day. That stuff's all great. What about the mood of the audience now? Everybody's used to be kind of pissed off. I used to be pissed off. I'm kind of depressed these days, Ron. I'm telling. Are you
Sure.
seeing that in your audiences when they show up? And are they? What about the mix? Are they there for the comedy, or are they there for the politics now?
I think they're there for both. I mean, I think people kind of like to laugh about things. I mean, I think if I got up there and just gave like a political lecture, they'd kind of be like, "Oh,
No.
dude, that's sort of not what we were expecting from you." On the same note, I think if I got up there and like didn't talk about anything going on in the world, they'd also be like, yeah, we follow your stuff and kind of expected a little more, observational stuff about what's going on in the world." People who know me best, they know that if you're coming to my stand-up show, you're not going to hear, 45 minutes of nothing but politics. Like you're
Yeah.
going to hear, you're going to hear about just other things, because there's other things that are part of my life. I'm a married man. I love my cat. I love punk rock music and just music in general. You're going to hear all that too, like all the things that, kind of
Oh
make
yeah.
up creative quilt of interest. Um,
Superheroes and soft serve ice cream and these damn crabs. I mean,
Totally.
there's all kinds
Yeah.
of stuff. I mean,
There's
you
all
never know what
kinds of
you're going to get
stuff.
at a Ron Placone show. That's for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
that's great.
so
Okay, now
that's all there too, but yeah, yeah. To
I
answer
want
your
to.
question, I think it's a mix.
What about this Iceland thing? Now, this is interesting to me, and the reason is I got a band up there that I really like. Are you still going to Iceland?
Yeah, I mean, next week,
How does
hopefully.
that happen?
Well, they have you're probably familiar with fringe festivals, just like the fringe festival circuit. Of course, the biggest fringe festival is in Edinburgh, Scotland, and it's the biggest and oldest arts festival in the world. but there are fringe festivals all over the world. Some are very comedy centric, some are not. Some are more just traditional theater and nothing else. Some have all kinds of different art forms, from burlesque to music to poetry in some cases to stand up and everything in between. Um, I have been wanting to do some of these types of things for a very, very long time. And I wanted to focus on more international ones because I want to do more international stuff. And I thought Iceland would be a pretty cool festival to start with because their Fringe Festival is not super old. It's only been going on for a handful of years. It's not crazy big, but it's not crazy small either. And it's not like it seems sort of like more community oriented, I mean, some of them, it's like there's so much going on that you're really just a minnow in an ocean trying to get people to come out to your shows. Whereas there, it kind of seems like there's a little more of a community aspect to it. And plus, I didn't know, like, what else am I going to be able to go to Iceland, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought that that would be a good festival to start with, to just kind of do that thing, you know, like do that different thing that
Yeah.
I've not done yet in my life. And I've always wanted to do a fringe festival. It's something I've wanted to do since I literally started comedy. Just the stars just never aligned. So I mean, again, during lockdown, I just kind of was like, okay, whenever we get to go back to doing this thing that we love, I am not going to take any moment for granted, and I'm not going to, do anything that I don't really want to be doing. And there's a lot of comics that have taken that approach,
Yeah.
where it's just like, okay, if we're doing a show, we really want to be there. This is something we're not just like putting together routing or just touring everywhere in the country for the hell of it. We really want to be there. And everywhere that I've been this year, I can say I really wanted to start doing more stuff in Canada. So I built some routing around Canada. And, that's pretty much how I built this year. And then I wanted to do the festival in Iceland. So I'm doing it. So, yeah, my shows in Iceland are June 28th and June 30th. You can get details at my website, ronplacone.com. And then I'm touring the Northwest at the end of July with Graham Elwood. And we're doing Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. And you can get tickets for that also at my website, ronplacone.com. And that's July 28th, 29th, and 30th, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver.
Okay, before we leave Iceland, are you familiar with these guys? This is a photo or an outtake, really, from a video that they did recently. This is Kaleo, and they're out of Iceland, and I really like these guys. Have you checked them out before?
No. Can
Yeah.
we play a quick snippet or no?
No, I didn't bring any of that up. You know, I hate to get into the trademark things. I probably could
Yeah,
save
you
20
could get
seconds of it,
dinged.
or yeah, with that. But they're really great. What I like about them is it's kind of like the early British invasion. They could have chosen any form of music from America that they wanted to run with, basically, because that's the largest market. I mean, they do that for a reason. But they
Mhm.
picked the kind of music that I really like. I mean, it's great stuff. They're really good. They played at Red Rocks. They've toured a little bit in this country. They got a couple of albums out. I've got both of them. And I
Well, how do you
imagine when you
spell
get
their name?
Kaleo, it's spelled Kaleo. And I got
Okay.
a feeling they're big man on campus. When you get up to Iceland, check those guys out. And I'd like to go to that part of the world too, because folks may not know this, but Ron's a hockey guy too. I mean, he's right at home in Canada, and he's out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
He's a huge Penguins fan, and I just kind of like the cold weather stuff. I think that would suit me just fine.
Who do you
Well,
think's going to take the cup?
I think it's Colorado's to lose. They seem to have that dynamic with the speed part of their game, which they are able to execute regardless of the rules and the checking and that type of thing. They've got that the Tampa Bay doesn't seem to have. Tampa's got everything else, but they don't seem to have the speed that they can match Colorado with. So, I mean, it's going to be a great series. I expect it to go
It will
6 or
be a
7 games,
fantastic.
but yeah, I think it's going to be Colorado. And
That's my guess too. My
yeah.
my not expert at all prediction, just hobbyist prediction, is Colorado in 6.
Yeah.
Because and I think I mean, I agree with everything you just said, but also Tampa Bay has just played a fuck ton of hockey. Are
Yeah.
we allowed to curse on this? I
Yeah,
know
they,
you're
they yeah, and they get the shit beat out of them. I mean, they get
okay.
pounded, boy. I mean, that's one thing that people
Yeah.
do not realize how used and abused these players are by the end of a long season
It's
or multiple.
intense. And
Yeah,
if you get to the Stanley Cup, you got like 2 months off and then you're back at it. That's why you don't see many back-to-back cups. It doesn't happen super often. I mean,
right.
Tampa Bay did it, the Penguins have done it, Detroit's done it, but you don't see it crazy often. So, yeah, I feel like it's a real uphill climb for them to do it 3 times in a row. So, and part of me, I mean, I don't have a dog in the fight, really. I'm just going to enjoy the series for the
Yeah.
fun of watching it. But I think I do have a slight preference to Colorado just because it's like, okay, you guys won it 2 years in a row. It'd be nice to see someone else get a
Yeah.
cup. And
Three peats are
Colorado's
cool,
just,
yeah, but yeah, I get
yeah,
that. Well, and in Colorado, I've got a little bit of an inbuilt bias because the Red Wings are the team that I like first and foremost. The Penguins are a close second in there, but of course, everybody in Detroit hates Colorado. Going way back
mm,
to that series where they had the line clearing brawls and the goalie fights between Chris Osgood and Patrick Waugh and all that kind of stuff. So there's no love lost between Red Wings fans and the Avalanche. Okay, I got to get to this housekeeping stuff because we're going to talk about some heavy stuff, some serious stuff. Some
sure.
of it's deadly serious. But I wanted to get to this real quick because this is new. I mentioned these projects that you have, Ron. This is a trailer that you've produced. It's called Loner. Tell us about this.
So it's a mini pilot and it has not been released to the public yet, but it is available. Again, if you join my Patreon, patreon.com/RobPlacone, you can watch all of Loner now. And what I mean by a mini pilot is, it's a first episode of what could be a series, but the episodes are shorter. Like, a typical comedy, series is maybe 30 minutes or 20 some minutes. This first episode is 12 minutes and it's meant to be that way. It's meant to be like shorter episodes. Netflix is experimenting with some of that format, so is HBO and Hulu and basically all the streaming platforms. So Loner is something that I wrote. I wrote it, I directed it, and I act in it. And the premise is you're following a guy through quarantine. The first episode takes place on March 23rd, 2020. So he's talking about going through lockdown, and he has to go through lockdown. He's a guy named Jordan who works in IT,
So,
and he's going through lockdown with the knowledge that he could have invested in Vroom, which is the fantasy version of Zoom, right? It's like their Zoom.
Vroom. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Vroom, Virtual Reality Office Operations Management. So it's called Vroom in their world. And he could have invested in it back in the day because his ex-girlfriend invented it. So he has to go through lockdown by himself with just him and his cat, which Lucy, of course, plays his cat, who is also named Lucy. But he has to go through that with the knowledge that he could be a millionaire right now if he had just invested. Like she asked for like $1,000 as like an investment. He had the money, but he didn't give it to her because he just didn't think it would work. And now, he could be a millionaire had he done that. But he's always been in love with this girl, and he found out she's recently single. So he's going to do a lot of self-searching during this lockdown. So that's what the show's about. The way we do it cinematically, is that a word? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's still morning where I'm at, George.
Yeah. No, yeah.
But but the way we do it is I'm the only person who's physically on screen. Everybody else is like, like they're all talking to him on his computer or on his phone. So he's always the only person who is physically on screen. So it was a cool concept. It was a cool pilot to make. We were able to shoot the whole thing in one day. And yeah, I look forward to the world seeing it. And if you're thinking that sounds like a pretty cool concept, I want to see it right now. Well, you can go to patreon.com/RobPlacone. You can sign up for a Give What You Can level. You can watch the whole thing right now. If you're a big network person and you're thinking, man, this series needs to be picked up, email me.
Get a hold of Ron. Yeah.
Get a hold of me because that's kind of what we want. We want
Yeah.
somebody with the financial resources to do so to fund this series. So, we'll see what happens once we drop it for the public.
Well, let's get to the serious stuff here because, Ron's got this alter ego. I mean, he's a comedian, he's a filmmaker. I mean, this stuff is great, but he's also a great political commentator, very insightful. I follow his work very closely. I learn a lot from this guy. And here's the topic that a lot of my, blue no matter who folks are talking about this January 6th made for television series that's on the DNC television networks, as I would call it, Ron. And this is out of the USA Today. Carnage and chaos, it reads. And I picked this paragraph out. I wanted to read this and then have Ron comment because this kind of strikes at the heart of it. Now, a crime referral. I mean, what are they trying to accomplish here with these January 6th hearings? Well, it reads, after the hearings, the committee says its investigation will continue. Why? It's not over, folks. I mean, we're a year and a half since the event. It's going to continue. Panel members will ultimately have to make a decision about whether they have found criminal activity and, if so, whether they should refer it to the Justice Department. The department, which is conducting its own investigation, could take or leave the recommendation. Committee members have been debating that issue, but have emphasized a referral is not their main goal. Quote, we're making a report to the American people about what happened, why it happened, and how we need to protect ourselves in the future, said Maryland Representative Jamie Raskin, a Democrat on the committee. Okay, so I get sideways with a lot of my lib friends, Ron, because I looked at this from the beginning and said, what the hell is this? Why are they doing this? What are they hoping to accomplish, particularly when it's being unseen, basically, by the type of people that need to see it, need to change their opinion and perspective for anything to happen. And that ain't happening. So What is the point here? I mean, that's my take on it.
Ratings. I mean, honestly, and I'm in the same boat as you, and so sometimes like I feel bad about it because it's like, but you can't like, it's like they're taking us and they're just like, 2 + 2 is going to be 5 this time.
Yeah.
No, 2 + 2 is always 4. You can't. And look, I mean, first they had that impeachment hearing, which they impeached Donald Trump, and then he got everything he wanted politically right after it. Then they impeached him again, and he can still run for president in 2024.
Wow.
He has faced no consequences whatsoever. And he has gotten everything he wanted politically. Everything. So it's like, this is just nonsense and theater. And I think these hearings is just like part 3 of that. And you have these people that they're like, well, no, something's going to happen this time. Did you hear the Liz Cheney lecture? Oh my God. She just, and it's like, this is just, and it's hard because I don't want to make light of the fact that, some people got killed that day. I mean, there's people who lost their lives on that thing. So I'm not trying to make light of that. But on the same note, I know theatrics when I see it. And you're just kind of like, and a lot of people that they'll bring up the hearings, like all of us are just watching it with popcorn in tow. And I've had a couple people where they're just like, I mean, something's gonna happen this time. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think anything. And they're like, I hope you're wrong. Like almost like I don't. And I'm like, I hope I'm wrong. Like most of the stuff I say, I hope I'm wrong. I wish I was wrong more often than I am, quite frankly. But I kind of think this is just a distraction for a number of reasons. One being the Democrats have got nothing to hang their hat on for the midterms, and they know it. They've been failing miserably, and they got nothing to hang their hat on. So this is something to kind of hang their hat on. 2, the corporate media kind of likes the ratings this is going to give them. 3, it's just kind of catnip to get people away from what's really going on in this country, which is we are collapsing. So yeah, I mean, I kind of have the same take on it as you do. And I really don't. I'm not trying to be like sometimes people they look at, I mean, especially if you're going to bring like the blue no matter who crowd into this, they look at someone like me and they say like, oh, you're cynical. And I'm like, what's more cynical than thinking we can't possibly do better than this?
Yeah.
What's more cynical than saying like, well, we just have to pick this super shitty candidate because otherwise this even shittier one, and we just have to, it just has to be a varying degree of shitty. This is just the way it'll be. And it can never possibly be any better than this, even though 90% of the people who live here aren't happy with the way things are going. Well, screw us. There's nothing we can do to turn this empire around, nothing at all. So just take it and shut up and watch these hearings and enjoy the popcorn and just hope that something happens to Donald Trump, even though nothing's going to. Like, I mean, the whole thing, a lot of people demonstrate that they don't even have the most basic of understanding of how our free speech law works. Look, did Donald did Donald Trump incite violence? I don't know, because I'm not some constitutional expert. Nor have I taken a deep dive into everything he's put out there. But that's not for me to decide. That's for a court of law to decide. And will a trial like that ever happen? Probably not. They would need to have something specific they could point to. So it's like these people that are saying like Donald Trump's gonna, but it's like, are they even looking at that? Are they even, I mean, think about when they were going after the guy for impeachment and stuff like that. The guy committed financial crimes by the day. The conflicts of interest he had. I mean, you could look this stuff online. It's a freaking list longer than a CVS receipt, and you could just see it. It was just out there, but they never looked at any of that. Why didn't they, George? Because Republicans and Democrats are complicit in the same shit. They do the same stuff. I dislike Donald Trump as much as everyone, but I'm not going to be that delusional to just like hyper focus on this orange man bad and make it prohibit me from seeing the frickin' forest because I'm being blocked by this tree. Okay.
Yeah.
Our system was wrecked long before Donald Trump came around. Donald Trump is a result of our system, not the cause of it. So I'm looking forward to moving on to other things. I have been since he got elected in 2016, quite frankly. So yeah, I think that kind of sums up my feelings on the hearings. And, I have a feeling it will lead to nothing, and I take no pleasure in being right again about that.
Well, there's a couple of things I would say about it right in line with that. And the first is, interestingly enough, and I heard Vincent Bugliosi say this a lot when he was talking about his book, Reclaiming History. And he was talking about Oliver Stone's kind of documentary on the Kennedy assassination, which is full of factual errors and inaccuracies, but it was meant to be a movie. But the point Bugliosi made is that most Americans get their history, believe it or not, frame their history from Hollywood, from movies. So I look at this and I think, well, okay, maybe they're trying to frame history. That's okay, but folks, we don't need a history. We need a future is the way that I look at it. And the other thing of it is, you mentioned Liz Cheney. My God, I about gag when I see Liz Cheney leading these things. This is a woman that was a birther. This is a woman that still supports the U.S. invasion of Iraq, I believe. One thing I don't want to do is condemn her for the sins of her father. I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily fair, but you don't need to condemn her for that. She's got plenty of other condemnation. Yeah.
If she embraces the sins of her father, then she's complicit in it. I mean, if she distanced herself from it, that'd be one thing, but she certainly doesn't. I mean, as you said, she's still fine with the Iraq war. So the fact that they're celebrating her now is absolutely remarkable.
It's just unbelievable. It tells you where we're at, actually. The last thing and I look at these things, I see some angles that other people don't, but this strikes me in politics. When we talk about the squad in particular and people like that, the Justice Democrats and all that, I look at these people, I look at this movie and they think that it's enough to inform people. They'll tell you that that's what they're wanting to do, that they just want to tell people, what the situation is. No, with these elected representatives that we're putting into Congress, we're putting you there to do something. Hell, we got podcasts by George to tell you what the problems are. We got, get your news on with Ron for the news. I don't need AOC to bitch on Twitter about things that nobody does anything about. We need them to do something. We've got plenty of information. And you mentioned this January 6th thing. My God, ad nauseum for a year and a half, every single minutia, every detail has been explored and put out there. And now it's being put out for the history books, I guess. But my God, enough with the with the diatribes. Do something.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, and that's why I don't follow any politicians on Twitter, and I honestly I mute a lot of them because there's so many of these just virtue signaling. What would blank mean for you and your family? Which, how insanely condescending is that, by the way? How would insert policy we're not fighting for here help you and your family? You know how it would help. You know how it would help. You don't need it. It doesn't matter for you, but it matters for us. And you know how it'll help. I call them all the ministry of appeasement because it's like they're just trying to make it seem like they're actually fighting for something when they're not. And obviously I'm not implying in any way that the squad is solely responsible for the ills of our politics. Of course they're not. And of course there are people who are way worse than them politically in office. Absolutely. But they were elected on the promise that they were going to play hardball and they were
Yes.
going to buck the establishment. They're not doing that. And look, I understand they are outnumbered. Everyone will point that out. They're outnumbered. No one denies that. If you can count, you can't deny that. It's a fact. But all we're asking is to use the leverage you do have, which they're just not doing. And they haven't been doing it time and time again. The fact that they don't even vote as a block is messed up, dude. Like
Yeah.
that's you guys are supposed to
Be a block.
the
Yeah.
voice for the people and
Yeah.
be a block, and you're not coordinating your votes and you're bragging about that. That's like the opposite of what you campaigned on and what you promised us. So I mean, we're just out here saying, like, do you have our back? Your action is saying you don't. And that's why, I mean, electorally, I have very, very, very little enthusiasm. Now, locally, that's a different story. Locally, I feel like local politics are a lot better in comparison because there's just more transparency and you really do have a chance to get someone in who wants to serve your community or someone who exploits it. And usually those are the range of choices you have. You have people who want to exploit your community because they have a bunch of developer asshole friends,
Yeah.
or you have someone who actually wants to serve it. Maybe that person and you don't agree on every single thing, but they do want to genuinely make where you live a better place. And it's their community too. So local, I do have a different attitude than federal. But
Plus, it's not about party. A lot of times it's about issues and policies,
Yeah.
which is what it's supposed to be about. You can have
Yeah.
the green ticket can win on a local basis with some politician. I mean, that's the gratifying thing about that. Well, I wanted to, before we get off of this, I want to bring this up. Now, I'm not going to read through all of this. I'll bring this up very quickly, but I consider this to be really the definitive work out there right now on this January 6th thing. And it's from Chris Hedges. I know Ron also follows him very closely. He's got a piece called The Society of Spectacle. And he says the televised spectacle of the January 6th hearings will not restore democracy or halt the rise of the far right. And I'm telling you, there are people that believe that it will. But Chris Hedges,
Yeah.
he's never wrong. That dude, you can take what he says to the bank, folks. And he's saying it ain't going to happen. He calls it the hearings, he says, are a desperate ploy by a doomed political class. Okay, well, I'm not going to read through all of this because it is rather lengthy, but I want
I
to
feel
point
like
people
that's
towards that.
basically that's
Yeah.
just a way more eloquent way of summing
he's
up
great.
everything we
Yeah.
just said. You know, I mean, that's why, you gotta love Hedges. It's just like, yeah, that's basically everything we were saying, but he just put it so much more eloquently because he's Chris Hedges.
Yeah, he is Chris Hedges. He's the greatest. And for folks that may not be familiar with his work, he was a Pulitzer Prize winning author. He was working for the New York Times. He objected. He protested about their coverage and endorsement and support of the Iraq War. He was fired. He was marginalized, and then he was demonized when he was on RT. And he was one of those guys that was shut down. He didn't have a platform any longer when RT America was closed down. And now you can go to Substack and follow Chris Hedges. I want to encourage everybody to do that. But we're here to talk about Ron Placone in particular. I want to show people this because this is I called this show, Ron, America Hold the Phone. It's Ron Placone. Well, here's Ron Placone holding the phone. This is a lot of what I'm seeing from Ron, and these are great. So watch this.
What's up, everybody? Ron Placone here, because it all goes down easier coming from a dude on the beach. Dollar General, where things are not generally a dollar, locked a bunch of employees out of their shareholder meeting. Now, employees have been pushing for higher wages and better conditions. The employees had every right to be there. They even cleared it with the company. They were going to have representation, but the company locked them out anyway. Wonder what they're hiding.
Okay, so I had a little trouble showing that, but these are these shorts that Ron is doing. He just, I don't know, it's like you're trying to clear your head or get your mind right out there on the beach. He lives in San Pedro out there in California, and these things are just, they're great. I mean, they're real thought provokers. They're not very long, so it's great for the short attention span theater that is America. And that is one that strikes right at home here in the heartland, because these Dollar Generals are everywhere. But,
Yeah.
you know, them along with the convenience stores in these rural communities, Ron, Dollar General is really the lifeline for a lot of these folks. I mean, that's where you go to get virtually everything except for your pizza and gasoline, which you get from the gas station. But Dollar General is also important, and they have been doing all so well during the pandemic. And I want to bring this up. You posed that question about what they're hiding. Well, over the last 5 years, the stock price of Dollar General has gone up, and I don't know if people can see that or not, 228.04%. So that means if you were making $10 an hour at the beginning of the pandemic, basically, maybe a little bit before, which that's about what they make at a Dollar General store, those folks should all be making $23 an hour now, Ron. I think that's probably not the case. And I think that may be
It's
what they did
definitely
not
not.
want to hear at that meeting.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, man, and this is I forget the term in economics for this, but there's a word for it. My intro to econ class was a long time ago at this point, so I don't remember it, but it's basically during tougher economic times, which of course we're in, people kind of migrate to more economically priced things like during tough economics times, people are more likely to get on a Greyhound bus than a plane. They're trying to save money. So people are more likely to shop at a Dollar General. And of course, as you mentioned, there's some people, they shop a lot at a Dollar General anyway. So basically, the workers are the reason Dollar General has seen this big spike, because during tough times, that's where people are going to lean. Well, you had your workers get you through the pandemic. You had them be the essential workers that they are, and you're still treating them like garbage. It's absolutely remarkable. I mean, it's so unbelievable what these companies do. And Dollar General is just the latest. I mean, they all do the same stuff. So it's awesome to kind of amplify this stuff. And it's awesome that there's organizations like More Perfect Union out there and Payday Report that are really focusing on what's going on with labor and what's going on with strikes and what's going on with protests, because it's infinitely important. I mean, the only way we're going to start to take power back is by withholding the most powerful thing we have, which is our freaking labor. But you can't just lean on the workers to do that. You can't tell somebody who's just trying to put food on the table for their kids, hey, go on strike and stop going to work. It takes all of us. We all have a role to play. So, I try to do what I can as a, communication vehicle or whatever you want to call me. I try to do what I can to help, and yeah, so shout out to the people at Dollar General who showed up to that meeting and tried to get in. You can see the video on More Perfect Union. And that's the other thing I do enjoy about these beach shorts. Like, I kind of give people this real quick summary of like, hey, this is happening. And then they can kind of go and be like, oh, let me dig into this. And then, of course, on like the longer Get Your News On with Ron streams, we go into it a little more too. But
here's a question that's coming in from a viewer here. Ron, they want to know, did corporations raise prices to get back the raises they gave workers? Well, that's interesting, because some of the minor raises occurred at the end of the pandemic. But of course, these profits went off the chart. I mean, some of the just unbelievable. Ron's become like a pseudo Iowan because I keep him apprised of the labor situation, which he follows closely here. We talked about that Deere and Company strike last time you were on, Ron. I mean, their profits went up 200, 300, 400% or something like that during the pandemic. Did you see where they've now, because they had to give the UAW a raise after serving during the pandemic, and they had to give a pittance to those workers, they're going to pick up part of their production and move it to Mexico?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that's what they do, because and part of it is because of meetings like this. They have these meetings where it's just their shareholders. Guess what? Your employees are also your shareholders and deserve to have a seat at the table. And it has gone on for far too long, and you can't like, oh well, if they pay the workers more, things will cost more. That's absolute nonsense. They're not going to cost themselves out of competition, and they're recording record profits. This isn't about economics necessarily. This isn't about a company being productive or being able to compete. This is about greed, because again, like you said, look at their profit margins, 300% and 400%. Look at the profit margins of the oil companies. Look at what they're profiting now. This is all about making those margins as big as possible. Well, stepping on the backs of the people who make it possible for you, your workers. So yeah, I mean, it's
Well, again, it's not a pass, but I will say this, and it goes to the heart of Linda's question. What I think is happening here a little bit is during that unique situation and circumstance with all the bailouts and all the money and all the juice that was put into these major corporations and all the growth that they experienced during the pandemic. Well, they've got stockholders, they've got people that have
yeah.
invested in them. Those people want to see that rate of growth continue. They don't want to see it plateau. They sure as hell don't want to see it decline. And in the example of deer, how do you do that? I mean, when you're having 3, 4, 500% growth, how do you maintain that? Well, pick up your shit and take it to Mexico and pay people $5 an hour to put it together down there. That'll make it continue to grow. And that's some of what's happening. They can't just sit on their hands. They want that chart to keep going up like that. And they're getting creative, and they're doing it on the backs of the American workers, I think.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, yeah, that's absolutely true. That's how the stock market works. That's how Wall Street works. And I think, when you just think about what Wall Street really is and how it really works, like, you realize that something like this should have never happened in a society. If you read like some of the early philosophers like Proudhon, they actually warned against ever creating something like Wall Street. They warned against ever creating a society where it was just all based on capital on top of capital. They said that wouldn't be unsustainable and would just eat itself. They were right. But some people saw that and they took it as an instruction manual, and they created this wackadoo system that we have now. But the truth of the matter is, like, these companies could still be making plenty of money and treat their workers right. And guess what happens when you treat workers right? They're more productive.
Right.
And then people have more money to spend in
to
the
buy
economy.
your stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the whole argument, and I'm not saying that's what Linda was trying to do. I don't think it was. But like the whole like argument about like, oh, well, if we higher the wages, then everything will cost. But that's not accurate at all. Like that's just the fear mongering they use. Like, no one, I mean, the big cliche they always throw out there is like, that Big Mac's gonna be $20. No, it isn't. Because guess what? If it was, no one would buy a frickin' Big Mac. And they know that. They can pay employees a living wage. The CEO makes 475 times to one the worker. They could pay a living wage, and it's better for everyone involved. Because guess what? That means more people would be able to go and have that Big Mac, which is not going to be $20. It's going to be the same price it is now. And you can look around the world at different McDonald's, and you can see what they pay their workers and how much a Big Mac freaking costs. And there's all kinds of countries where it's like the Big Mac costs as much or less than it does in the United States, and workers get paid $20-something an hour. So,
yeah. Well, here's another big reason they're able to do what they're able to do. Deer is a quintessential example of this, but this is something that's big in your world, Ron, and I know you've been talking about this a lot, and it has to do with this antitrust summit, this monopoly situation that we have in America. My God, it is killing us, folks. Talk about that, Ron.
So, please, everybody watching, go to antitrustsummer.com, sign this petition. It takes less than a minute to do, and it is so important. So right now, there's 2 antitrust bills in Congress, OMA and ACOA. And here's what they do. So right now, in the App Store, Google and Apple dominate that store. And for any alternative app or independent app to even be listed, they have to pay exorbitant fees. They have these ridiculous commissions that Google and Apple takes. And sometimes their software won't even work because Google and Apple kind of get to dictate what software works on your device. This law breaks that up. It levels the playing field for alternative apps, and it allows you, the user, to determine which software works on your device. ACOA is a very interesting piece of legislation. So when you search for something on Google or Amazon, which is where most searches take place, Amazon and Google will favor their products and services above everyone else. So, like, let's say an example that they did in the John Oliver segment. Let's say that I'm searching for this designer bag on Amazon. Well, what Amazon does is they show me these knockoff designer bags that they make themselves, and that shows up first in the results. And I have to scroll way down to see any other results from any other vendors. And the other thing Amazon does is they harvest your data. So let's say that there's a bag that's really popular that people are buying and people love it. Amazon knows that because of all the data they harvest. So they go, okay, we got to make a knockoff of this bag and then sell it for cheaper and make sure it only shows up in the search results. So they're screwing over other vendors to just pad their own pockets. And this is just completely unethical when they have the market dominance that they have. So these bills help rein that in. And it requires Google and Amazon and other corporate big tech giants to kind of just show the results fairly and like a level playing field. So these two antitrust bills are infinitely important as far as the future of the internet's concerned. What do we want for the future of the internet? Do we want the internet to be a democratizing super highway of information where people can make their own choices and everyone has a shot to put their stuff out there? That's what it was supposed to be. That's what it was founded on. That's what made it great in the first place.
Yeah.
Or do we want it to continue to descend into a monopolistic capitalist hellscape, which it's descending into? These bills help break that up. They are infinitely important. And here's the best part. We have a chance at winning. There's an article that came out in Reuters that
We
says
can win. Oh my God.
we can win one. We can win one. An article just came out in Reuters that said they got the votes in the Senate and the House to get these things through. Here's a couple problems, though. It's up to Chuck Schumer to bring these to the floor. Chuck Schumer promised he'd bring them to the floor the week of June 20th, which is next week. Nothing's been scheduled yet. Chuck Schumer also has two daughters, one who is a lobbyist at Amazon, one who works with Meta, which is Facebook.
You're kidding.
Big tech is, of course not.
Oh,
Big
God.
tech is spending a ton of money, George, to silence these bills. Big tech is spending all kinds of money. They're putting all kinds of BS ads out there. They're making all these claims, like they're saying, well, if this bill passed, we won't be able to offer Prime anymore. We won't be able to have Google Maps anymore. That's a bunch of hogwash. This bill does not stop anyone from offering any products and services they want. What this bill does is it says to these corporate juggernauts, hey, you can't tip the scales for your products and services. This is the internet. You have to be fair and level with everything because you are dominating the marketplace. Even though the United States has a million problems in this area, we do have a history of antitrust legislation. We have a history of when we got it right, and we have a history of when we got it wrong. An example of when we got it right, going into the telecom world, is when we broke up AT&T. There was a time where AT&T, and you and I both remember this, George,
Yeah.
AT&T had a monopoly on our phone service. Long distance calls were price gouged to the gills, and nobody even knew what we were capable of. And people liked AT&T because they were the only game in town. They're like, yeah, AT&T offers all this great stuff. Well, they don't let anyone else offer anything different. So antitrust legislation was enforced, and it broke up AT&T. What happened after that? Long distance calling got a lot more reasonably priced. We got inventions like the answering machine. We got inventions like the modem, which helped lead to the freaking World Wide Web as we know it. So antitrust legislation leads to more innovation. It leads to more competition. That's why this has support across the political spectrum. People on the left and the right support this legislation. This has support even in office. Josh Hawley supports this bill. So does Bernie Sanders.
That's a spectrum. Yeah.
Don't agree. Yeah, that's a spectrum. And this bill was written by Amy Klobuchar. And Amy Klobuchar, full disclaimer, her and Chuck Grassley, who is a Republican out of
Our
Illinois,
guy. Oh, yeah. No, Iowa. Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, Iowa. Yeah,
right
yeah.
Here,
sorry.
Yeah. He's our
I
boy.
pointed to you, so I meant to say Iowa.
Yeah.
I just brain farted. But yeah, he's your guy. And the two of them have been writing bills together in the digital rights space. And most of the time, they're misses. Like most of the stuff I've seen, I've been critical of. These bills are good. These bills, they actually got right. So I am pleading with people, and I'm helping my colleagues over at Fight for the Future with this campaign. Go to antitrustsummer.com, sign this petition. We have to be loud. We have a chance at winning this. And this is a huge piece of legislation. I know there's so many things going on in the world. There's so many things that deserve your attention. But this is something that will have a huge impact. That is an attainable win. So please, I am begging you, antitrustsummer.com, sign the petition. Have you already signed, George?
Yeah, I'm going to as soon as I get off.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
I will, because here's the thing that what you were saying, it really strikes home with me, Ron. My mother worked for Bell Telephone, and this
Mhm.
was before AT&T, and you could have excused and continued that monopoly, that death grip on America, by saying, look at all the jobs. Look at all the hiring that AT&T provided. My God, we can't touch them. Don't break them up because of the jobs that they provide. Look at the women that they brought into the marketplace, the operators, and like my mother, through Bell Telephone and AT&T. Well, God, this is why I love your insight on this stuff, Ron, because just think of what we have gotten since that was broken up, AT&T. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, that's cool. That really
A
is a
similar thing here, and I do recommend. John Oliver did a fantastic segment on this. Now, I don't agree with every point of view John Oliver has on his show. I've definitely disagreed with some things, but for whatever reason, I don't know, like if it's someone on the writing staff or what, but for whatever reason, when it comes to digital rights, that show really knocks it out of the park. They did an excellent net neutrality segment, and they did an excellent segment on this antitrust legislation that really just lays it out, and it's entertaining too. So yeah, go to antitrustsummer.com. Please sign the petition.
All right, let me put that up on screen once more. There it is. Okay, and so bring me back here, and I'm looking at the clock. We're already coming up on our time allotment. I like to hold these live streams, these live lines, as I call them, Ron, to about an hour or so, and we're approaching that, and you're busy. You got things to do, so I got to let you go. I guess maybe final thoughts here to wrap it up a little bit. We talked about January 6th. We talked about the antitrust summer.com and the situation with the Dollar General. Those were some things that I wanted to cover. Anything else that's top of mind here that you want to leave us with?
Just go to antitrustsummer.com. I mean,
We man.
there's a million things going on in the world we can talk about, but I will say this as sort of a thematic thing. Digital rights is really something that I spend a lot of time on. It's something I've been passionate about for a really long time. And it's because I kind of see the connection, no pun intended, to so many other things going on in our world. I mean, where would we be without a free and open internet? We'd be really up the creek without a paddle big time. And when you think about what is going on with climate change and how important it is to be embraced in our global village, we need a free and open internet now more than ever. And while these antitrust bills don't solve every issue that we have in the digital rights space, no one piece of legislation will. This is a huge first step, a huge first step. So please join us, antitrustsummer.com. Please sign, tell your friends, tell your family. It takes less than a minute, and it is so important. And for anyone who might be in Iceland or in the Pacific Northwest, ronplacone.com. I'll see you on the road. Sign that petition and then go over and get some tickets. ronplacone.com for all that. And yeah, thanks for having me, George.
Oh, yeah, and a free and open internet. We got to have that because that's what allows us to visit with Ron Placone and watch his shows and look forward to these movies and shorts and all this stuff. I mean, it's great stuff. And catch him out on the road. He's coming to a town near you. Ron, thanks again for always, pal, for coming on Podcast by George.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and folks, if you like Podcasts by George, if you like seeing Ron Placone and you like discussions like this, and really, I learned a lot today. If you like learning the type of stuff that we talked about, go to podcastbygeorge.com. Pick a platform where you'd like to follow me, and you'll see Ron once in a while and all these other great guests that I have on the show. You can see the videos, you can see the live streams on Facebook or on YouTube. And of course, you can get the replays of the audio on the audio only streaming services like iTunes and Spotify, and there's a place called Deezer, I think, that I'm on, Stitcher, a lot of places like that. You can get us just about any place that podcasts are seen or heard. But that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more, folks. That's another Podcast by George Live Line.